What's up, gamers? I'm Josh, and this is Copper Dragon Games. Today we're looking at 3 add-ons for Foundry Virtual Tabletop that will make your game look awesome. Let's get started. So the first add-on that we're going to be looking at to make your game look amazing is just called DiceSoNice. And it is a quick add-on that lets you animate 3D dice that roll across the screen whenever you make a roll. They're pretty sweet. If you're missing out on being able to actually see the dice, this is a good way to have dice that roll on the screen, even though you don't have physical ones in your hand. You get to see the results rather than just looking at the sidebar and seeing the numbers pop up. There's something aesthetically pleasing about having the dice themselves rather than just seeing a formula, and I can appreciate that. Now, I will say, though, this is one that I do not typically use. The reason I don't typically use this add-on, even though it looks really cool, is that I also have an add-on enabled called Better Rolls for 5e. I covered that add-on in a different video, which I'll link to below, but essentially it lets you roll extra dice and then only use the ones that you need. For example, if you roll to attack, it always rolls 2d20, and then if you have advantage, you take the higher. If you have disadvantage, you take the lower, and if you don't have either one, you just take the first roll. When you have both enabled at the same time, you may run into a situation where you have an attack roll that does not have advantage, but the second roll is a natural 20. And in that case, the crit damage will automatically be rolled, even though you don't need it. And it runs a whole bunch of dice on the screen that just seem superfluous. Vocabulary word for the day. In any case, I still love DiceSoNice, though, even though I don't typically use it. As you can see with my screen, when I roll the dice, they come up this light blue, Carolina blue where I'm from. That is the default, and it matches the player configuration, so the default color that you have set for your player. However, you can go in and go to Configure Settings, Module Settings, 3D Dice Settings, and change all kinds of different things about these. I'm going to make it look crazy here just to kind of throw it off so that you can see some of the effects of changing all the colors and things. But it is, you can even add textures, add some glitter on there, some transparent glitter. Anyway, it is really cool. It looks amazing. If you are running a system that runs lots of dice, it might not be the best. It does slow down your system a little bit because it's having to render those 3D objects every time you make a roll. But overall, amazing look and feel. Alright, so the next add-on we're going to be looking at is called Dancing Lights. This affects how the lighting works within the program, going from the default lighting, which looks a little like this, to having much more dynamic effects. You can see in the default settings, there's this very clear delineation between the bright light and between the dim light and then darkness beyond. It does give you a very clear distinction between the spaces that are brightly lit and the spaces that are dimly lit and the spaces that are not lit at all. It just doesn't happen to be very pretty. So to change that, we get an add-on called Dancing Lights. I already have that added and activated in my modules, so I don't have to do anything extra there. I just need to add a new light source. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one and add a brand new one in its place. And let's hold shift and move that so that it's actually centered on that fire. And then we can double click and get the settings. And most of this is the default, right? You get this anyway, anytime you're running the program. But with dancing lights turned on, you can scroll down and you have these additional options. So we're going to enable dancing lights. And this enable blur is what takes us away from that very game-centric distinction between dim light and bright light It gives us a blur between the two so that it's less obvious and more realistic looking. I often bring this all the way up to 100 unless it's a very small light source. And then enable dim blur is what changes the blurring effect between dim light and the darkness. So if we bring these up to 100, this is going to give us the biggest change from what we normally see. At this point we can click on the token and see now this is a very uniform blending. There's a little bit of a line here as it goes from dim to darkness, but for the most part we don't see that line between the bright light and the dim light. And it's a much more pleasing effect to the eye in my opinion. That's not the best effect of dancing lights. True to its name, we can take this light that's associated with a fire on our map and actually add some fire-like animation to it. We get some colors associated with it. I like to bring mine up a little bit and make them a little warmer. You can change the movement amount, which is a flickering effect. We can change the fading. We could have done that before. But anyway, if you scroll all the way down, you can update that light. And then when we see through the player's eyes, we get a very cool effect that makes that light really pop on the screen. It's really cool to be able to set up your map with different lighting sources that show light in different ways. But that's not actually my favorite part of the app. It is really cool. I do like it. But my favorite part of this add-on is the ability to add light sources to tokens. I prepped a few of these ahead of time. And I want to show you some of the cool things that you can do with tokens and adding lighting effects. Very similar to the one that came with the fire. If we add a magmin to the board, this is the typical effect. But I really like that you can also add a token with a lighting effect. You don't see it by default, just like a light source, but when you see through the player's eyes, you can see an exaggerated flickering effect. You see that red source, that darker source around him, and this really, it really visually brings the map to life, brings your tokens to life. That's a very obvious one. We kind of started with a fire effect and then moved into a token with a fire effect. But there's some other cool things you can do with this. Another of my favorites is a will-o-wisp. Again, normal will-o-wisp token is not super exciting, but you add one with lighting effects, you can really get a cool effect. Now this technically is just a fire effect with the colors changed to blue and white and the flickering effect turned up significantly. There are also other lighting effects. Let me go and highlight those real quickly. You can also do a blinking effect, a fading effect. I haven't messed around much with the lightning, but electric fault is a slow flicker, almost like you're in a haunted house and the lights are flickering on and off as spirits are interacting with the electricity. Kind of a spooky look. But anyway, back to our examples here. So that's another kind of obvious one that you can do with the glowing will-o-wisp. Let's get rid of that one. This is one of the cooler effects that I was playing around with, and my players have not seen any of these technically, but they will soon. A shadow normally is just kind of a dark figure, but you can change your lighting effects to black and really give a shadow a kind of a spooky, see if I can zoom in. I made the effect really slow so that this darkness effect around it fades in and out over the course of a couple seconds. And I guess I could exaggerate it just for effect to show off what's going on in the video. I'll make it black and gray just to show it off. I like the slightly more subtle version rather than going to completely black, but you can see it fades back and forth over the course of a couple seconds and really feeds into that shadowy, spooky, undead presence. There are a ton of extra effects that I'm sure you could pull off with these. I just started playing around with this the last couple days, and I'm already impressed with what I can do with it to improve the quality of the visual effects in my maps. The last, and probably my favorite add-on to make your game look awesome, is called, I forgot what it's called, Token Magic FX. That's embarrassing. This is an add-on that I've been using for quite a while in my games, and it essentially allows you to add special effects to tokens mid-game as they're in play. They are attached to macros, so you don't have to go into the settings or anything. You just click a button. There are a ton of different options. Once you have the add-on downloaded and enabled, you just go over to your compendium packs and it'll be down under macros. You can click on, not dancing lights, but token magic, and find all the different ones that they have available. There are a ton. There are new ones added all the time, but you can drag these down to your macro bar at the bottom of the screen and use them as you wish. Now, I'll show you some of the ones that I use, and also some of the ones that are just kind of different and interesting. The first one you're going to want to make sure you have is delete filters on selected. So as you add things to your creatures, you can remove them as needed. But some of them, the first one I'll show you is just called Dodge Jump, and it's a one-time effect. You click it, the creature just kind of jumps over to the side, and then that particular macro doesn't do anything else. But some of the others stay attached to the creature, modifying the artwork, and you will need that delete filters macro in order to reset them to normal when the time comes. So one of the ones that I use every once in a while is the wound splash, and this just gives you some combat damage here. So when this creature gets hit, you can click wound splash, and there is a little red mark that comes up on it. You click it again, you get another one, and you can continue doing that. I don't like how with this particular token it is acting like the shadow is also wounded, but that's not always the case. We'll use it with this guy as well. Just a little quick wound splash. He got hurt. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, you could just delete those filters and reset them to normal when the time comes. Maybe he chugged a healing potion and all that blood disappeared. No longer hurt. There are tons of these. I do like when players cast Fairy Fire to, well, if the creature was invisible to begin with, I hit him with the fairy outline. Then if they weren't invisible and the players can still see them, I use these little glowing globes to signify that effect. Helps me remember that they get advantage to hit them. This pure fire is the one that I used first with my players, if I remember correctly. One of my players cast Searing Smite, hit one of the bad guys, and caught it on fire. And I immediately clicked this button, and there was a whoa effect among the players in my group. If you are running underwater adventures for some reason, or adventures near a water source, sometimes you'll get a fish token or something, and it'll look like that creature is laying on top of the water or flying above the water, no matter what you do. This flood feature is one way of signifying that it's actually below the water. That's a pretty cool effect. There are some sci-fi-ish versions. This one in particular is like a force field effect, but you could probably use this for maybe a force cage or Odaluk's resilient sphere, maybe. There's a drop shadow to just enhance the shadows on a creature. add shadows to a token that didn't have them before, for example. If one of my players ever casts Mirror Image, they will definitely get this effect on their token in the game. This is one of those effects that actually hurts my eyes a little, so I probably will use this sparingly, but it's cool. And then if you look carefully, there are a few that are just for fun, like this Glory to Pixels effect, which turns this really cool looking token into something that looks like it came from a maybe early 90s video game. Not particularly my style, but I know there are folks out there that love that style of artwork, so that may be appealing to you. No judgment. You can go back to the list though and see there are tons of these, some of which I have only barely tried, but really it's as simple as dragging one of these to your macro bar and seeing what happens when you click on a token and activate it. There's another one that hurts my eyes. And we're on a roll. But that is really cool effect. One thing that's really cool about this add-on as well is that you can mix and match these. So you can add more than one at the same time. If I wanted to pixelate something and also blur it, I can do that. If I want to, I'm not going to do that chaotic one again. That really hurt my eyes. Maybe give something some mage armor. Maybe give something some glowing globes and also have it underwater and somehow also catch on fire. It's possible, I guess. There are numerous combinations with these effects that look cool, and I'm sure with some experimentation you can find one that's great for your game.